back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. This week, UFC 276, T-Mobile Arena, International Fight Week. We got two big title fights on the line. First up in the main event, defending champ Israel Adesanya making his fifth title defense against Cannonier. We move down to the co-main event where it's a trilogy fight between featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, former champion Max Holloway. As well, man, Sugar Sean opening up the pay-per-view is always nice. We've got the number one contender fight between Strickland and Pereira. Extremely great night of fights, man. Hopefully we can find some spots to get your boy back on track here. As far as last week goes, you were completely right. A greaseball of a decision in the main event between two high-level prospects. The judges did agree on the scorecards for once, which was nice, but they did kind of go back to the old ways where it was more, control over damage, which had not been rewarded in the weeks prior. But looking back, very high-level prospects. Somebody probably shouldn't have been that big of an underdog to begin with. And he wasn't the only underdog to cash this weekend either. In Cage Warriors, PFL, and Bellator, all three of the other main events, underdog cash there. A lot of money be made for Vegas this weekend. But before you and I get into this pay-per-view, as always, man, go ahead and let them know how we finished up last week.
Yeah, we'll start off with your card first, and your biggest play of the night was a parlay between Nurmagomedov and Rakhmonov, both to win. Both of them covered their price tag, and definitely their best play of your night. You also had two parlays with Saryukin as one of the pieces. Maybe should have gotten that nod, but ultimately, like you said, maybe too close to be putting in the parlay. The Chris Curtis, you had a TKO round 2 and round 3. He was digging those shots to the body of Vieira. I thought that they were going to pay towards the end, but he just never found the finish. You ended up minus 3.17 units. Definitely something that you can come back from. Going over to my card, my biggest bet of the night was Thiago Moises over Christoph Giagos. I put 4.5 units on it, and thankfully he didn't make it a sweat at all. First round submission, super happy about that one. And then Chris Curtis versus Rodolfo Vieira, another one where it was like the line continued to move as the week went on, and then finally you got a minus 120 price tag before fight time. Jumped on that one, and sadly, motivated JP buys just didn't come through, man. I really wanted to see him get the dub, but he got absolutely dominated by Cody Durden, and probably won't be seeing him in the UFC any longer. I ended up the night plus 4.66 units, and want to keep on rolling into next week. Our main event is for the middleweight strap between Israel Adesanya taking on the challenger Jared Cannonier. Adesanya kind of finally taking on some new blood in this division. Unfortunately, this is looking like the easiest fight since Paulo in 2020. Cannonier, absolute anomaly. Rarely do you ever see somebody with his level of athleticism and then add on the fact that he can stay super competitive and even get a knockout against UFC level guys up at the heavyweight division. He's rightfully earned his title shot here, but I really think that says a lot more about the state of the middleweight division than it does anything else. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it a little later on, but there's a 5-1 kickboxer that's fighting for the middleweight strap with a win this weekend. I won't go through Cannonier's whole middleweight record, but I honestly think that his best win might have been in 2020, the 2022 Gastelum that we know, who was 1-4 in his last 5 fights going into that bout. And it just doesn't hold a lot of weight for me. If you know anything about Izzy coming into this fight, he's going to use his length to stay on the outside, his movements to get his opponents to chase, and those feints to expose the openings in his opponent's defenses. But I just can't think of an instance where Cannonier stops him from doing those exact things, man. He doesn't have the footwork to cut off the cage of Izzy. He doesn't have the speed to catch Izzy clean, or the wrestling chops to control takedowns that he might attempt, After these last few main events, I got to be more realistic with the possibility that anyone can lose on a given night. So in a perfect world, I think Jared could land powerful shots towards the end of rounds that could score heavy in the judges' eyes. Izzy has been known to coast in those rounds as well. And I think Jared could have some success if he mixes in those takedowns, but I do think that it's going to be hard for anybody at 185 to hold down and control Izzy. Ultimately, I'm going to be going with Izzy as my pick. Rightful favorite being the longer, younger, more skilled fighter of the two. But I will not be laying 4-1 on him. I think that there's a couple other ways that you could play him, but the money line, I just don't see the value. It being MMA, the judges being how they have been, I don't see much value over an 80% win rate.
I got you, man. So as far as picks and how we see this fight, you and I are going to come out on the same side here, and it's hard for me not to bet Ezreal almost every single time. The guy's been my guy since coming into the UFC. UFC's got him and Max Holloway on the card together again. If they were anywhere close, I would be there. Israel, it's been damn near perfect. He's 11-1 in the UFC so far, with the lone blemish when he's trying to go up to capture a second belt at light heavyweight. And there are very, very few guys that come to mind have had much success, going up from middleweight to light heavyweight. You pretty much touched it. The breakdown's pretty simple, man. I think on the feet, Izzy's just going to have his way with Cannonier. There's nobody in the UFC more technical on the feet than Izzy. He's in the T-Mobile Arena with a big cage for that footwork, real patient behind his jab. And the way Cannonier just plots forward, man, he's going to be there to be hit. Leg's going to get chewed up like Costa. A lot of the same things. And where the game plan is always to come in and wrestle him. Outside of Blockowitz, who was 40 pounds heavier on fight night, no one's been successful in doing so. Marvin Vettori, Brunson, Whitaker, they all have a much better wrestling, grappling game than Jared Cannonier. They don't have success taking Izzy down, keeping him down, holding him down to make it, weigh on the scorecards. Cannonier's not going to have success here. And then let's look at the way Jared's been hurt on the feet by Whitaker, dropped by Brunson, and even finished by Dominic Reyes. And I don't think any of those guys have near the level of striking that he's going to see in the cage on Saturday night. The way he kind of, like I said, plots forward recklessly, doesn't have the sharpest defense. If he walks with his hands down like he did against Kutelaba trying to put on a show, man, Izzy's going to put this guy away. The minus 400 money line on FanDuel, yeah, it's pretty easy to pass on that. Earlier in the week, they had his TKO and decision at down to minus 260 for never being, he doesn't have a submission win on his record. It's definitely a nice change in price, but it's definitely getting up there, and as crazy as these main events and shaky as they've been lately, passing on this number is not hard to do. In our co-main event, the featherweight straps back up for grabs between Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway in their trilogy fight. Very few times do you see guys fight, twice before where the result is the same and you're completely okay with it being booked a third time. These guys have 100% submitted themselves as the top two 145ers, and it's a hard sell that if you run this fight 100 times that anybody wins it more than like 65% percent of the time there. With Volk, last time, man, the dude looked practically unbeatable. I know it was against a Korean Zombie who he was just completely, better than, but he just looks so accurate with his shots, man. And the way he tears up your lead leg, his fight IQ is off the charts, his speed being so small, and then even the championship ability to like be down 2 rounds to Max Holloway and make those adjustments to come back and win the last 3. It's everything you want to see in a model champion. You deepen Brian Ortega's submissions, fighting his way out of them. And the same can be said for Max, man. Absolute model champion, great dude, inside and outside. His boxing is absolutely off the charts and really overwhelms you with the pace and a volume that just melts guys down the stretch. And, last time he mixed in a head kick that kind of wobbled Volk a little bit. Volk's being the shorter guy, it's something he does have to deal with. The only time he's been finished was by a head kick. I think it was in like welterweight or something, but it's something that he has to do, something that I think Max probably should mix in the game plan here, because if he's just going to keep this fight on the feet, I don't see if it's going to be anything different, truly. I think Volk's probably still going to get the better of him. He's much more defensively sound than Max, and reminiscent of Emmett versus Cater if Max is out there with his, short little pitter-patter jabs and Volk coming over the top with the power. Judges still tend to favor that down the stretch, so the pick's going to be Volkanovski, despite Max being my boy. I think it goes to full 25 minutes again because they've seen each other's weapons so many times, but I think yourself has a little different take there.
Yeah, man. I'm just going to rattle off some things. Like you said, Volk's striking has never looked better. Max has always been super hittable. In fact, holds the record for most absorbed strikes in the UFC, and he's now technically in his 30s. Max dropped Volk 2 times in their previous matchups, and nobody in the world is on the under here. I know Vegas has been cleaning house recently, and this is a small sample size, but for what it's worth, the UFC has had 24 trilogy fights under its name, and 21 of those 24 trilogies have had at least one of their bouts end inside the distance. For me, I see 2 of the best fighters in the world who have had nearly an hour of fight time with their opponent, 3 years to think about it, and they're peaking at the same time right now. Fighting is fighting, and I don't think that the winner of this bout automatically means that they're the better MMA fighter, but I got a feeling that somebody's got the read and somebody's getting slept, man. And we're getting plus 150-ish on Fight Doesn't Go the Distance, 40% implied odds. I really like it. All that being said, I do think that I'm going to slightly favor Volk here. I think he'll look to mix in his grappling more than he has in their previous matchups, and it'll just add another layer for Max to think about. With Volk's cardio, I don't worry about the additional grappling slowing him down even in the later rounds. And for Max, I think he's good enough to stand with Volk. He just needs to put more pop on his shots. If he does end up catching Volk with one of those clean shots, I would hope that Max looks to capitalize more on those moments than he has in the past, where he just smiles and points at him like, I got you. If he capitalizes on those moments, I think that that's also his biggest critique that I could make moving forward. Hard to make a play on either money line, but I got to think that the value is on Max at a fight that we both kind of see as 50-50. I prefer to play the fight doesn't go the distance because, like I said, I think one of these guys will have a read, and everybody and their mom is on the over.
So I do have a play on this fight, but it's not on the money line. You're right. Both decisions have been somewhat greasy. You don't know who's winning when they hit the scorecards, and I don't know if I want the minus 180 ticket in my hand when that's happening.
We always like to talk about the third fight for a pay-per-view, and that one is in the middleweight division between Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. And, this whole lead up to this fight, I thought I'd be on the Sean Strickland side, especially at that plus money. But I just don't have it in me right now to try and fade the UFC's marketing campaigns anymore, man. Chase Hooper, Jeff Molina's, Adrian Yanez, and Pereira right here, all recent examples of of guys at the UFC's pushing from a marketing perspective, and it's been a bad idea to try and challenge that. Plus, you look at who Sean Strickland is and the type of things he says online. I love that the UFC is all for free speech, but that doesn't make me believe that they're going to be picking favorable matchups for the guy whose main talking points are murder, pedophilia, and trans rights. I think right now, I hate to get too conspiracy theory, but it is Pride Month, and I know that there would have to be a lot of people that would love to see Sean Strickland get slept right now. He is up against a legitimate kickboxer here in Alex Pereira. The key word being kickboxer. Right. Alex Pereira is 5-1 in MMA and has been relatively untested in his ground game. If this were a matchup between him and Robert Whittaker or him and Marvin Vettori, I think it would be the easiest max bet of the century, because I wouldn't be questioning whether or not they would look to expose the wrestling deficiencies of this pure striker. That's not the case with Sean, man. Sean has a lot of ego involved in his game, and he's not afraid to admit it. Until this weekend, there was one thing I could guarantee you, is that you weren't going to see many, if any, takedown attempts from Sean Strickland. I mean, he openly trash talked about how, quote-unquote, gay wrestlers are with their fight style, and if you're not standing up trading, you're a pussy. And now people are wanting me to believe that D1 Sean is about to show up here. I don't think so, man. Even if Sean does manage to get the fight to the mat, I doubt that he has the top game to score significant control time or damage for that matter. The wrestling might just be used as another thing for Pereira to think about, but as far as scoring, I doubt that it'll play much of a factor. In a fight where I expect 10 minutes or more of it to take place on the feet, I am going to go with the more polished striker of the two, with more power and a push from the UFC brass. So give me Pereira. I don't necessarily love laying the juice on him, but if you can get him at evens, I do think that the coin flip would go his way more often than not.
So yeah, I'm going to be on the other side of you here, man. It's Sean Strickland. It is the number one contender fight, and it does tell you the state of the middleweight division, but in my opinion, it tells you the state of who the champion is, man. He's absolutely cleaned out the division, beaten multiple guys, twice. And when you look down through the rankings, these really are the only guys that are on a win streak right now. Strickland, dude's been on a tear since coming back up to middleweight since the motorcycle accident. He's still only 31 years old. Vastly improving, man. We always talk about what he does in the gym, whether it's American Top Team, whether it's an Extreme Couture and stuff, Syndicate, and the dude is just always sparring with some of the best in the world. Magomed, Francis, even goes down to spar with Vettori and people like that. And if you look online, he's been out in American Top Team sparring with a world champion European kickboxer as well. So I know the guy's ego is it's tough to deal with. I know his mouth and makes him not a fan, for a lot of people, but I would bet my money on it that he has taken this fight as serious as possible. He knows he is next in line for Israel Adesanya if he can get through this guy. He is greatly coached by Eric Nixick, and I mean, UFC needs to cut him if he does not go out here and shoot a takedown. the blueprint's there, man. Michaelitis takes, almost the entire round off of him, and he's 0-3 in the UFC, probably cut. Bruno Silva, who is a cut and dry striker, 20% of the fight controls Alex Pereira. For Strickland to be the number 4 middleweight in the world, I know he possesses the skill set for it. I know he's been working for it in the training camps. And when you look back at his Uriah Hall fight, he was willing to mix it up a little bit with Uriah Hall, who is another good striker, who has that power to bonk you and put your lights out when you least expect it. And he lands a takedown in rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. So Hall, a guy we'll talk about here in a little bit, the guy's never been submitted in his pro career. He holds like I think a 70% takedown defense throughout a long UFC career. I think Sean's going to land some takedowns here, man, but if he is stupid enough to stand in the middle and exchange jabs with a world-class kickboxer, I think Sean has potential to get slept, man. Pereira's got an unreal frame for the division. Some of the nastiest strikes I see, everything is just so technical. The way he throws his hooks is just right behind the opponent's high guard. And you always talk about his power. Everyone's going to talk about the Thomas Powell fight, on Fight Pass. I looked at the actual times yesterday. 6 minutes, 27 seconds is when the knockout comes. At 13 minutes and 10 seconds, they announce Alex the winner next to an unconscious body and just cut the thing. So legitimately, almost 7 minutes later, this guy is unconscious. And again, a lot of people would probably like to see that for Sean Strickland on Saturday as well. So it does make me nervous. But at plus 100, man, if I were to pass on the number 4 middleweight at plus 100, fighting a 5-1 kickboxer and he wins, I'd almost slap myself come Sunday morning.
All right, so for my fight of the night, I had to pick the future Ian Garry taking on his toughest test to date against Gabe Green. Ian Garry been on an absolute tear since entering the UFC with back-to-back wins over Jordan Williams and Darian Weeks. As he showed in his UFC debut, Garry has an excellent sense of distance management, similar to other fighters out of Ireland. He loves to use that slip counter, and even in his regional scene fights, you see a ton of Garry just standing right outside of his opponent's range and picking them apart with his long jabs and those leg kicks. He'll definitely have an aggressive dance partner with Gabe Green on the other side of the octagon. I feel like Gabe has a very similar style to Santiago Ponzinibbio, just pressure, 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 and definitely not the prettiest of performances, but always entertaining and will always fight for your money. In a fight that I see being full of violence, I actually think that this will be one that goes to the judges. On one hand, I could see Garry landing the much cleaner shots that keep Gabe at the end of his punches and kicks for 15 minutes. Probably not knocking him out. Gabe does have an incredible chin, which we saw on display in the Daniel Rodriguez fight. And on the other hand, I could see Green being much more physical of the two, pushing Garry up against the cage, making the fight dirty, not really giving him a chance to breathe. And then you have to bank on the judges scoring for strikes in the clinch and control on the fence. So I don't really like either side from a betting perspective. Officially, I'll pick Garry, but I don't want to lay the juice on him. So I'm debating on laying the fight goes to decision at minus 110. I think that both these guys are tough enough that they won't be getting finished on Saturday.
I don't necessarily hate that goes the distance play, but I'm going to ride Ian Garry until the brakes fall off with these type of numbers, man. A lot of shit for him. He kind of gets put on it for that debut performance early where he was kind of letting Jordan Williams kind of get the best of him. But dude's 23 years old, man, and in Madison Square Garden with the eyes of the world on him, And then we can't really leave out the fact that Jordan Williams was on the Contender Series 3 times. UFC wanted him, He knocked out RoboCop at 185 pounds. The UFC knew this guy was going to come after Ian early and test him, And then the last time out, you got to see him go the full 3 rounds and not get that quick finish. And that's only going to help a 24-year-old now grow as a fighter. I think on the feet, I think he's going to win 100% of the minutes against Gabe Green. I think he's twice the striker here. The way he manages that distance you talk about, Gabe's going to have to close it, and he closes it recklessly. I think that fadeaway right hand is going to be there all night for him. But he does kind of back away with the chin in the air, and if Gabe Green is willing to eat one and still throw 2 or 3 more, he might be able to catch that chin. But I'd see a lot of people saying the general consensus is Gabe, should probably try to wrestle here, and I'm just not so sold on him being able to do so. Darian Weeks is a very, very talented JUCO wrestler. The guy had 19 amateur fights as well, and he found 0 success wrestling Garry. You combine that with how I watched Johan Lainez take down Gabe Green last time a couple times and even get a hold of the neck. I like Ian Garry, man, in this matchup. Gabe Green, He's tough. He's willing to bite down and take one, but the chin has let him down a couple times. He's been knocked out, I think, by Jalin Turner and Bellator, and even in the Johan Linus fight, I think he woke up when he hit the floor in round one when he got hit. So, man, minus 166 on Garry against these other fringe top 30 guys. I don't think he is the future as like a top 5, but I think Ian Garry is always going to be that fringe top 15 fighter. And while the fade spot's around the corner, I don't think it's going to be Saturday night.
You add in the marketing perspective too. Of course, the UFC would like to see Ian, the future Garry, win this.
On the scorecards.
Yeah, even on the scorecards. You're right. He might even get the nod if it does go to the scorecard. So I'm with you. We're both picking Garry here.
For my fight of the night, I'm going to be taking Brad Riddell versus Jalin Turner. City Kickboxing squad's traveling, man. You got Brad Riddell joining his teammates, both Izzy and Volk, on this card. And, dude, when I look at this fight, it just has violence written all over it. I'm really looking forward to this fight on Saturday. When I look down through the card, it's definitely one of the ones that stick out the most to me. Brad Riddell, world-class striker, but my God, is this guy going to have to close some distance on Saturday? I think it's an 8-inch height disadvantage, and while the reach advantage is only like 4 inches, that is going to be even more pronounced, once they stand across from each other in the cage. So really, how does Riddell win this, man? He's got to do one of two things, in my opinion. He's got to wrestle the way Matt Frevola did. I don't think he has that level of wrestling. I don't think he has the gas tank to be able to do that. And if he does try to get to the floor, man, Jalen's got a black belt on the mat that I really think he can cause some issues with. So then your only other option is to close that distance by biting down and slinging some big hooks. And if he has no sense of urgency, man, he's just going to get stuck on the outside of Jalin Turner, I think, here, who's going to be able to use that octagon, use his reach, and potentially, even stretch this fight out. For Jalin, he's got to protect the chin. If Brad's willing to, slip that jab, get in there, throw a couple hooks to the body, get his hands down before he goes up top, Jalin, he cuts a shit ton of weight for 155 pounds. He's massive, and he's been TKO'd in 3 of his 5 losses before, and I promise you, if Riddell clips him, it's going to hurt him. But the Jalin that I'm seeing in the octagon lately is vast improving, and he is a southpaw fighter here, which a lot of people think comes with a lot of natural advantages. He loves that, head kick and his teep kick, which should keep Brad Riddell on the edge, and also being the southpaw, it's going to take away the calf kick that you would want to chop down at them little bitty legs that he has. And then, when guys do try to close that distance on him, man, he's great in the clinch, being so tall. He's got massive knees up the middle, and I think those knees are going to come in handy here against Brad Riddell, whether he's hurting him with them or, whether he catches Brad shooting with one of those knees. Jalin just kind of seems to be on a roll right now. It's hard to go against the physical advantages that he's going to have. When I see the fight, that's probably going to play out on the feet. The guy's 4-fight win streak right now will finish him all inside the distance. I think he's going to make it 5 on Saturday, man. I think I'm going to roll with the Tarantula Jalin Turner.
For my fighter to watch, we gotta talk about Sean O'Malley, man. Yeah. We were big fans of him. We still are, but I don't know. After the Marlon Vera antics, we kind of hopped off his hype train. Here he's finally taking on the first ranked opponent in his career, and you kind of use ranked loosely when you're 1-4 in your last 5. Pedro Munoz, not really the best level of competition that Sean should be facing, but definitely a step up from what we have been seeing. I think Sean's got him covered in just about every area. I know a lot of people are talking about Munoz's black belt, but we've seen Sean go and grapple some really good grapplers in the past. He's been entering a couple of grappling tournaments. He submitted Takanori Gomi. That's more than enough to tell me that he's going to be safe if this fight does reach the mat. On the feet, he's the most dangerous fighter in the division, in my opinion. So as well, yeah. He's so long, he's so fast, and he's just not there to get hit. I know that Munoz's his claim to fame is leg kicks. I don't think that that's going to be present with Sean O'Malley here, and I think Sean would switch stances before he takes too much damage from the leg kicks. I think that Sean's also going to have a massive speed advantage here, which will ultimately be the downfall of Pedro Munoz. Over 15 minutes, I think that Munoz will get tagged multiple times. I imagine that Sean will be able to find the finish, but Munoz is so tough. Yeah. It's going to be a tough ask. Thankfully, this fight isn't 5 rounds. As O'Malley moves up, and he does have these 5-round fights, I think that he's going to slow down significantly with the amount of output that he has. But this is not that fight. I do think that he's going to get his first ranked win here, and Munoz is a good guy for him to do it.
We see this fight the exact same way, and I know we're both on O'Malley here. I just don't know, due to the durability, if he's going to get that done inside the distance. But yeah, size, speed, everything's on his edge. And when you do bring up the calf kicks, even the Marlon Vera one, that's like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. That calf's been kicked 500 times since then and not done that. So ability to switch stances, yeah, give me Sean O'Malley on Saturday. Andre Muniz, for my fighter to watch, some guy that you're on here as well. He's the second biggest favorite on the card outside of the champ, Israel Adesanya. And it's actually the biggest price you've had to pay on Muniz yet, and you can argue that it's his hardest competition to date. So the bookies are really high on this guy. They do see the potential as well. These two guys, and Uriah Hall and him are just in two different points of the career. Uriah Hall is 37. The win streak he was kind of putting together before Sean Strickland was nothing really impressive if you go through it, And for Muniz, just been on a tear since entering the UFC, finishing, I think, all but one of his fights. And while he seems to be a pretty one-dimensional fighter, I definitely do not want him standing at kickboxing range for 15 minutes with Uriah Hall. I think I can count on him to shoot the takedowns like he always does. The wrestling, earlier in his career, I didn't really necessarily think it was the best. But these last two fights against Jacare and Eric Anders, man, he's gone out there and shot these nasty double legs, just put them on their ass. And I think if he goes out there and does that to Uriah Hall, gets him up against the cage, clings onto him like a little leech like he is, man, 15 of his 22 wins by submission. You leave that arm anywhere, and he's going to snatch it up. And then you want to look through Uriah Hall. He's never been submitted in his career, which is a good feather to have in your cap. But anybody who's proactively wanted to wrestle him, they've pretty much had success. Sean Strickland, I brought it up, he's a striker, and he went out there and landed a takedown in 4 of the 5 rounds. And Carlos Jr., more than 10 minutes of control time. And you go all the way back to his, days on Ultimate Fighter. He gets beat by Kevin Gastelum due to the wrestling. And so ACJ, a very similar style opponent to Andre Muniz. So if you give up 10 minutes of control time again here to a guy like Andre Muniz, who's just in his prime, who has plenty of ways to set up his submissions, yeah, I think he actually could submit Uriah Hall for the first time in his career.
Yeah, so we're seeing this fight the same way. I think that the UFC gave Uriah Hall his last chance. He's approaching 38 years old. They gave him his last chance by setting him up with another striker in Sean Strickland, and he lost. I think we're about to see the downfall of Uriah Hall, and this is just another prospect in Andre Muniz who will kick off that downfall. For my underdog of the night, I'm taking Dricus du Plessis. And I have the same feeling about this one as I did Thiago Moises last week. This is a setup fight. There's no other way around it. You got a 28-year-old South African prospect with solid hype, 2 good UFC wins, and now you're trying to give him someone with slight name value that's over the hill. Although Tavares isn't what I would call an elite fighter, he has been in the UFC for over a decade, and this is about to be his 9th pay-per-view appearance. He's coming off of a year-long layoff at 34 years old after fighting tooth and nail with Omari Akhmedov, who's no longer in the UFC. This is very similar to the Edmund Shabazian setup fight, in my opinion. You got a young power puncher, quick finishing rates, and I think you're giving Tavares as a guy who has been finished by TKO in the first or second round 3 different times. I have some reserve betting, a huge chunk on du Plessis. I'm aware that this is also his biggest step up in competition. But even with that being true, I do think that there's an argument that this would be one of, if not the biggest ones for Tavares as well. Really, his record isn't aging that well either. Dricus has never seen the judges' scorecards in his career, and bookies are hanging out plus money on fight doesn't go to decision. I think he's going to be a problem for Tavares with his power. I think that he has the wrestling chops to keep this on the feet if Tavares starts to shoot takedowns. I lined Dricus at minus 150, and I got in on him at minus 105. So as long as it's under that, I think there's value.
With you, man. We both got in on him about the same price tag, and it looks like he's becoming a pretty popular underdog this week here, and I think that line's starting to flip. See it the same way, man. I think he's going to land that nuclear power that he has in that right hand and put Tavares away. Fight got moved up to the pay-per-view. I'm going to go Brian Barberena for my underdog here. Stylistically, it has fireworks written all over it, and it's got to be a dream come true for Barberena to not have some guy out here shooting 10-plus takedowns on him. Robbie Lawler has landed 1 takedown since 2014, and it's the flip over his head of Ben Askren. So it really wasn't like a takedown entry and setup and everything, but Robbie, I will say, always a great defensive wrestler. The sprawls and things to be able to keep the fight on the feet, amazing. Really offensive wrestling, you haven't really seen that throughout his career, man. So I think this fight takes place on the feet. While they're both past their prime, I still favor the durability of Barberena a bit more here. The wars of Robbie really look like they've taken a toll on him. And when you see guys who have real good forward pressure like RDA and Colby, the volume and it really tends to cause an issue for him. You even look back at the round 1 against Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz throws 176 strikes, wins round 1 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. Robbie just struggles with it, man. He can't get past the range. He was getting tagged to the body and just got lucky that Nick showed up way out of shape and couldn't go more than a round, So I think Barb's got that gas tank in him. I think he's going to be able to stay on a Lawler with those all 3 rounds. Kind of like that Max Holloway finish, You see Robbie get pinned up against the cage a little bit in the RDA and the Colby fights, and even his fights with Roy McDonald, he kind of gets up against the cage, shells up, takes too many strikes, and I think we're going to see Barb overwhelm him against the cage and get the finish here on Saturday.
My prop bet of the week, I've already mentioned it a little bit. It is Gabe Greeny and Garry fight goes to decision. I rarely have this type of read. I rarely have it. I think the last one was a JJ Aldridge fight where they were offering plus money on fight goes to decision. I have to trust it. I just don't. I think that Gabe Green has the durability to take Ian Gary's punches over 3 rounds, and I think Ian Gary's good enough to not get finished by Gabe Green. This one being even money to see the judges, I'm going to have to take a stab on it.
Yeah, I mean, as Gary goes up in competition, those finishes aren't going to be as prevalent as they were, younger in his career. So I definitely don't hate that with the way he manages his range. Favorite prop for me, I'm going to go Volkanovski, round 4-5 decision at minus 105. Dropped 1.5 units on it. I said it earlier here, it's my way of trying to have not so much of a chalky ticket in my hand when Volkanovski has a good chance of winning this on the scorecards. He's won the first 2 fights on the scorecards, so I thought it was a pretty generous price tag to begin with. Much like Max, incredible volume. I think he could easily go, 10 rounds, honestly, and start to put that pressure on you late. If he does find the finish, I think it's the accumulation of punches that he puts on Max. He seems ultra durable, but you talk about the record he holds for most punches without being knocked down. It's gonna come, it's gonna come one day. So I do lean Volk by decision, but if he were to get one of those late round finishes, durability of Max, sometimes it's gonna go sometimes. So I like having those championship rounds where Volk really been picking up the pace, but ultimately I'm gonna go Volk by decision, and I think I'm gonna have a minus 105 price tag in my hand.
For my best bet, I will be taking Macy Barber. Another setup fight. Initially a setup fight for Casey O'Neill, but instead I got an even tougher matchup with Macy Barber, to send her into retirement. Has a 5-9 UFC record. She's 35 years old and has dropped her last 3 fights at 125. Barber at this point in her career, is at this point in her career where I feel like we've already seen her deal with the adversity of being an extremely young UFC fighter making their way up the rankings. She's fought through a fight with Roxy with a blown out knee. She's gone through 15 minutes with some of the best strikers the division has to offer, like Alexa Grasso. And now she's won 2 back-to-back 15-minute fights in the UFC against equal or better competition in Miranda Maverick and Montana De La Rosa. This is the time in her career where I think that she breaks through, makes it clear that she's one of these top girls in the division. And where she's at this point in her career, I think all those pieces are kind of coming together. We're only going to see her improve dramatically from this point on. And I feel the exact opposite for I think that I is on the decline, and the fact that she's still in the UFC is wild to me.
So for me on Macy Barber, I've kind of been on the opposite end of her. I've tried to fade her in her last 2 with both of those opponents that you just listed. But yeah, this fight does seem like a great spot for her. Jessica does seem to be on the tail end, and I like Macy Barber to win on Saturday too. Best bet, let's stay in the women's divisions, man. I'm going to give you Jessica Rose Clark at minus 120, man. I wish I would have, simp for sure. I wish I would have got plus 175 open on Bet Online. I think that was absolutely absurd, and it's just, we're seeing just a market overcorrection of her losing to, who was it, Stephanie Egger by first round armbar last time out. So Stoliarenko, she's 0-3 in the UFC, and she's lost all 3 fights by her inability to, get the grappler off of her. Yana Kunitskaya put her on the cage for 13 of the 15 minutes, and she couldn't even get off the cage. And she gives up the rear naked choke to Julia Vila in the 3rd round. And then in the last round, or the last fight with Alexis Davis needs one takedown in rounds 1 and 3 to easily take this fight. So I will say, she got armbarred last time out. Julia Stoyarenko has about 87 arm bars on her record. And so that does make me a little bit worried because the moment the fights with Alexis Davis and Yana hit the ground, she was working for that arm bar. But you got to think Jessica has addressed that issue, plans to stay safe here. On the feet, I think Jessica's going to win this fight. She's a very physically strong girl and should be able to bully Jalija around in a lot of these clinch situations. Bring up Jalija falling off the back of the scales and things. Her weight cut is never really that good for 135. I expect her to kind of fade down the stretch in that grappling and pace of Jessica Rose Clark to take over. She's marketable, she's hot, and kind of like you said in the UFC, if this goes to the scorecards and it's close, I think they're going to give it to the pretty girl who had the grappling upside. Give me Jessica Rose Clark for my best bet.
And now for our quick pick section. We start off the night with a bantamweight bout between Jessica Rose Clark and Julia Stoyarenko. I'm going to have to go Jessica Rose Clark here.
Yeah, man, she's my best bet. Give me Jessica Rose Clark. And for moving up, second fight, middleweight division, Brad Tavares, Dricus Du Plessis. I'm on Dricus as well, man. Give me him as a knockout.
Was an underdog pick, no longer an underdog pick. I'm also on Dricus Du Plessis here. Moving on to the flyweight division, we have Jessica Eye versus Macy Barber. Macy Barber is my best bet. I think she rolls.
Yeah, man, she's the first leg of your parlay, and I might end up getting there with you. I'm going to go Macy Barber. Second leg of the parlay that we're thinking about, Andre Muniz. I think he has real potential to sub Uriah Hall on Saturday if he's able to get the same amount of control time Hall's been giving up lately.
Yeah, a little bit of a setup fight here. I think Muniz is the side as well. Then we have a welterweight fight. We might have should have brought up, but it's Donald Cerrone versus Jim Miller. I think this being at welterweight benefits Donald. I'm going to lean Donald Cerrone at the price tag here.
I was done breaking down Donald Cerrone fights, for him to fall apart. But this price tag on him at welterweight, like you talked about, is a little absurd. At this stage, do I want to back him? I don't know, but I'm seeing like a plus 400 decision line out there that I do kind of like. Ian Garry versus Gabe Green. I'm going to go Ian Garry. He might touch the chin, but I do lean for you, kind of like you, stay safe for the full 15.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Garry as well. I don't love it, but I'll go Garry. Moving on, we go to lightweight, Brad Riddell versus Jalin Turner. I'm going Brad Riddell here.
I think we're going to have the first split of the night. I'm going to go with Jalin Turner. I think the reach and thing is going to be hard to get by. Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barberena. Kicking off the main card, it looks like here. I took my dog in Brian Barberena, man.
I don't know. I don't see this fight going to the scorecards. I think we've talked about it, but I'll go with you. I think Brian Barberena, especially at the price tag, is the side. Moving on to bantamweight, we have Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley rolls here.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm trying to see the dribble between the legs. Mm-hmm. Flash knockout. That'd be nice. Sean Strickland, Alex Pereira. I think we're going to have another disagreement here, man. Plus 100, number 4 middleweight in the world, 5-1 kickboxer, man. I'll take plus 100 all day on Sean Strickland.
I'm fading the ego of Sean. I'm taking Alex Pereira here. And then the co-main event, we have Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. My pick to win is Volkanovski.
I hate saying it, man. Max has always been my dude, but I think Volkanovski is one of the most underappreciated, but yet most talented champions on the roster. Going to stay with the New Zealander, Israel Adesanya. I think he's going to knock Jared Cannonier out in championship rounds on Saturday.
This will be 4 Aussies in a row that I'm picking. I've got Israel Adesanya as well, and I think everybody from Australia is going to roll.
Nice. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hop in the comments there. Let us know who you guys have in the main event and the co-main event. We got 12 fights, weigh-ins on Friday. We'll see you guys on Saturday.
Peace.